I got to know. So I clicked the button and I just started scrolling until I see numbers, and it was like $697,000, and I about shit my pants. Like, I couldn't focus the rest of the day. I didn't send the contract to the treasurer. It's like, it just completely blew my mind.
Welcome to Trail Effect. I am your host, Josh Blum. Trail Effect is a show that dives into the stories behind trails, the communities that embrace trails, and the people who rely on trails as a way of life. The goal of this show is to turn the stories you will hear from our guests into useful knowledge that can be applied to your community while providing some entertaining and inspirational content. Guests on Trail Effect include trail builders, board members, community leaders, volunteers, and regular people who really enjoy trails. For episode 189, we have Chase Draper, the president of the Birmingham Urban Mountain Peddlers, otherwise known as BUMP. BUMP is another powerhouse volunteer-driven trail organization that falls under the SORBA mothership located in the southeast region of the United States. Chase provides some excellent stories about what can be accomplished when you're willing to outwork everyone else, and he's got a pretty sarcastic personality as well. Cooley Creative is the title sponsor for this episode. They design and build custom websites, as well as help companies with branding, photography, and e-commerce. Cooley Creative was started in Wisconsin, but is now based out of Bend, Oregon. Jared from Cooley Creative is a friend of mine. We've traveled together on multiple mountain bike trips, and sometimes he sends it. For more information about Cooley Creative, head on over to www.dudejustsendit.com. Yes, that's right, www.dudejustsendit will get you to the Cooley Creative website, so check it out. Cattle Mountain Apparel, the brand that was built by travelers, hikers, trail runners, and mountain bikers, with the motto of venture far, laugh hard. While I definitely use Cattle Mountain apparel for mountain biking, Cattle Mountain is also my go-to choice for daily wear as it is super functional and comfortable. Cattle Mountain Apparel also offers a lifetime gear repair program with the goal of extending the life of their products while reducing waste in the process. If you ever damage any of your apparel, Cattle Mountain will repair it for free for life. By using the affiliate link found in the show notes or on the Trail Effect website, a small commission will come back to the Trail Effect podcast, which helps to cover the cost of expenses for keeping this show going. Now on to the Trail Effect with Chase Draper and BUMP. Here we are today on Trail Effect. I've got Chase Draper. Chase is the president of Birmingham Urban Mountain Peddlers, otherwise known as BUMP. And this is another volunteer-driven mountain bike organization that is based out of Southeast, which is a powerhouse for mountain bike advocacy. And this is also another chapter of SORBA. How's it going today, Chase?
We're holding it together.
Yeah. How's the weather down there, and how's this winter been?
There's been some cold spells, but it's not been bad. I mean, most of this week it was about 70 degrees, but I think the wind was blowing about 35 miles an hour Tuesday, so it was fun.
Nice. Well, let's dig into your backstory quickly to kind of set the stage of this and how you got into mountain biking, and maybe more specifically, how you got involved with BUMP as your local trail organization, because you are the president of that organization.
Yeah, bad choices and bad decisions got me everything I've ever accomplished. So first, I guess, I got into mountain biking after I moved to Birmingham. It didn't exist where I'm from in North Alabama. It was so sparse anyway. There just wasn't opportunity, so I never got into it. I had four-wheelers and dirt bikes and horses, and I've always been on trails and in the woods, but never really had a chance to mountain bike until I moved down here. And once we got settled here, my wife got in the master's program at UAB, and she was never here and didn't have anything to do, didn't know anybody. So just I lived near Oak Mountain and started going out there and riding on a piece of crap bike I got from a buddy for next to nothing. And it kind of spiraled out of control from there. And as far as BUMP, I was peripherally involved in the trails, kind of a here and there guy for a while. And a buddy of mine, actually, technically, I didn't know him at the time, but I went to, a work day, and I met a guy that just got to be the trail chair of the club, and he was kind of a lunatic, so we hit it off pretty well, and then I kind of just got more and more involved from there. And like the presidency, I got on the board as a trail director, and Jeff was rolling off. He was this position is pretty thankless, and it's an amount of work that you wouldn't really understand from the outside. And he burned himself out and let it go. And I talked to my other friends on the board, and none of them were like super interested in taking it on. So I'll give a whack at it and see how far I can make it before I get fired. But it turns out nobody wants the job, so it's hard to get fired.
I think that's a common theme, unfortunately, but thankfully there are people like you that actually get into this kind of stuff, because I can relate.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty involved, and I've typically focused on, Jeff, it's like you need to go to the city council meetings and the Parks and Rec meetings. You need to do this, you need to do that. It's like, man, I don't like meetings. I don't want to go to meetings. I'm just going to keep my head down and work. And I did that for a while, and we started getting some recognition for the amount of stuff that we were accomplishing. And then I started getting invited to meetings.
So that kind of backfired on you.
Yeah. I mean, the meetings, I think, are an important part to make the connections you need and to network into these groups that can assist you in getting funding and help kind of promote what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, if you just keep your head down and keep digging all the time, I mean, there's something to be said for what you can accomplish. But at some point, you're going to need a little help, and being connected with people and having some name recognition and doing things the right way and being known for that, I think you can start to gain some traction and get some support from people who otherwise wouldn't help.
With that, let's roll into the backstory of Bump on its own, the way you know it, because from what I could tell, it's a fairly old trail organization. It's over 30 years old. You got a large number of members, I think I read close to 500 members, and you're part of SORBA.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the first chapter in Alabama, and it started with, a group of nuts who wanted to ride bikes in the woods. So, they had some fire roads at Oak Mountain, and I think they started riding that, and they started, having meetings with the park and trying to develop that relationship and get permission to expand it. And I don't really think there was anything beyond a few hiking trails out there then. And over the past 30 years, Bump's been the leading advocate for mountain biking, certainly in Oak Mountain and the Birmingham area, but probably led the charge for the state. And then, we just kind of kept plugging away, and it's a lot of, persistence and dedication and hand digging. And, we didn't have equipment. We didn't have money. They just basically dug a 16-mile loop by hand. And then, we started gaining some traction, and the Shelby County recognized, some value there, and started assisting with some RTP grant writing and things. And, it got a little more developed. And here we are. I mean, we've got, 40 plus miles at Oak Mountain. I think it's one of the best places to ride in the Southeast. It's certainly under-recognized for the diversity of trails there. We've got Tails, which is funded by Fox. It's an incredible, flow trail. Lightning was probably the first directional flow trail in the state. Boulder Ridge is like flow tech, big boulders, rock rolls. Boulder Ridge, West Ridge, Hyde. There's rocks, there's flow, there's old school single track, there's, machine built flowy cross country stuff. It's just it's a slice of paradise, and it's, incredibly diverse with different soil kinds, rocks here and sand there and clay over there. It wasn't a battle won overnight. It took years and years and years of volunteer work to develop it to what it is.
Yeah. And with that, you've got a fair amount of projects coming online. We can take this one of two ways. We can go into your adaptive project, or we can go into your gravity project first. I'll let you choose, but we're going to get into the details of both.
Well, I just had a meeting about the gravity project this morning. I went out with the stakeholders and looked at the upper portions of both of those trails with park staff, county staff, and the trail builders, kind of just checking some boxes before we get ready to open those up. We're nearing being ready. We've got to get some signage out there for liability purposes. The green line, I say green line, I know you're not excited, but they did an incredible job building some forgiving but big jumps. And there's some alt features that are pretty dark colored. So we're going to get some signs out there to denote the alt features. But, Shaggy and Benny did an incredible job out there with Barry Smith, and then Ethan Hoff was working on the Blue Trail, and he's close to finishing that up. So hopefully that stuff will get open soon, but that's just really the first 2 trails in that project. There's 2 other trails being built by Mike Intervold and Trail Visions. And they're a little more techie in nature. One of them is going to, for the Ember Ride Center thing, it's going to check the technical descent box, but it's going to be bi-directional. And it's, on this one ridge paralleling our Fire Road climb that's really beautiful. There's big rock walls up there, and there's some nice overlooks. But, just due to that ridge being what it is, it's going to check that techie box for us in that Ride Center application. And then there's another trail that leads off the top of Oak Mountain's Fire Road and Oak Mountain proper into the new Forever Wild property. And he hasn't begun on that yet, but it's also going to be a bit techie, but it's going to have these incredible overlooks looking out over Chelsea and Shelby County. And then finally, we're building the Black Gravity Line. Our budget didn't allow for us to fund everything we wanted. And so Bump elected to take on the build of the final gravity line that we were hoping for, which is, that's fine with us, really, because what we had in mind when we walked that line and flagged that line was something a bit more raw and rugged. So they're actually going to start working on that this weekend. The first volunteer work day to start cutting that is coming up. And then the last thing in the current project is a paved pump track and jump line and skills area. And that's still in the bid process now.
Let's talk about the funding aspect of that, because I believe, or at least if I read it properly, this is at least partially funded through Inovate Alabama. And that seems to be a grant that has came up in this podcast before, and something that is really helping fund trails in the state of Alabama.
Yeah, they're funding a lot of stuff. They had the Hoover Institute come down. I don't really know where they're out of. I think Condoleezza Rice is associated with it. I think it might be out of Stanford. But they came in and looked at the state, and did kind of an economic development study. And they kind of keyed on that we were, one, the state's beautiful, and 2, we were underutilizing that for the economy. So, they wrote a big report. The state bought in 100%. And, the report said we needed, STEM jobs and outdoor recreation. That's how you grow a state like ours. So, the first round of funding, or at least as far as I know, the first round of funding, we got some money and Coldwater got some money. It was roughly $1.1 million each for us and Coldwater for these massive projects we have going on currently. The county is administering that, and they're footing part of the bill too. Shelby County's always been, they've been invested in trails a lot longer than, you've seen an explosion in trail building over the last couple of years after COVID. Everybody's like, well, we need to get outside and we need to do stuff. But the county's been working on it for years. They've got 2 separate properties they bought and got 20 plus miles of trail on each of them. So they kind of were ahead of the curve on that, and they've been developing their own stuff for years. And they got involved in this project, and they handled the administration and supervision. They're building all their bridges in-house. They've got a trail builder on staff, and he's been the point of contact with the builders on site. So, I work a full-time job, and he can go out there and help touch up flag lines and answer questions and reroute around this giant boulder field or whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, I was going to say that I've met that builder at various conferences, and I was going to say Shelby County is ahead of the curve in having, staff that actually does building.
Yeah, Jack's a good guy. He worked for Trail Visions for a bit here, and then they got slow, and he went to work for Barry Smith, and kind of came up through the ranks working for him. And Shelby decided they wanted to bring in an in-house guy and put out an application. And he's got it. He's been working out there, I guess, 3 or 4 years now. But I mean, they keep him running. Like I said, between him and he's got another guy working under him, they're maintaining that, 40 to 50 miles of trail spread across those two parks. But then there's also multiple greenways, and they'll send him out even outside Shelby County, to help with planning and flagging for other municipalities. I know Hoover's in Jefferson County, and he's going up there and help them. They keep them spread thin.
Yeah, that's a lot of work for 1 to 2 people.
Yeah,
that's a lot of work.
Well, they sub out a lot of the full construction jobs. They'll sub it out and then, have him supervising and measuring, handling payments, and then also doing maintenance while he's doing that. And occasionally he'll go out, build his own little segment or trail here or there. But so they sub out, the big projects so that he has time to handle the small stuff and do the supervision part of the job.
Backing up to the gravity trails at Oak Mountain State Park, what kind of value do you see the matting? I mean, I think you and I know what the value is, but I'd like to hear your perspective on what that's going to do for that park.
I think it's going to be huge. I mean, we've always had what we've always had. And it didn't really strike me until, recently that, the park is pretty heavily skewed, and not even the park, it's like the whole region is heavily skewed toward XC trail. And there's a ton of intermediate stuff. And then there's a handful of really fun bi-directional trails that you can really jam down. But the only 2 directional flow trails we had were Lightning and Tails, and they're about a half mile long each. So, I mean, having something like this I think it's going to really bring a ton of energy to the area, a ton of visitors to the area, because those 3 trails are going to be on par with the Walden's Ridge stuff. I mean, they're not like anything else. Like, I'm really surprised that they were able to find clay. Like, the first time I went out there and Shaggy was digging in clay, like, I was blown away, because when we flagged it, it's just like boulder fields. And I fully expected them to be, stacking rocks for the whole top quarter mile, and then, hitting clay at about 800 foot and going down from there. But I mean, there's places where he had the bench, chest deep in the ground. And once you got under the rocks, it's good red clay. It's going to drain good. It's going to be really sustainable. And, they created some really fun shapes out of it.
What are we talking for elevation at Oak Mountain State Park from top to bottom, as far as functional elevation?
Those are, like I always say, about 600 feet. Those mountains are about 600 feet from bottom to top. And there may be a bit more or a bit less, depending on where you come off the ridge line. But you're looking, all 3 of those trails are going to drop 600 feet over a mile-ish. So, I mean, it's enough to get your wheels spinning.
Yeah, no, that's especially with it being, all pedalable, so that's a lot of climbing too.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be one return line that goes up the mountain, and it's going to be a real bear. There's a handful of switchbacks, and it's about 600 feet over a mile and a half. But the first half mile, it's not that much climbing. So it gets real punishing real quick. So people are going to have to get tough or get e-bikes.
Is this place open to e-bikes?
They're currently trying to reevaluate the law. As it was written, the way the trails are rated inside all of Alabama state parks is for non-motorized. So I helped a bit in the rewriting of that. They came up with a plan, but it was written by a lawyer, and I don't think he knew what an e-bike was. So, I mean, it was written in kind of a strange way. So they turned it over to us, and, I made some notes. And at the time, before Jacob rolled off board, Jacob was a lawyer, and I sent it over to him, and he put lawyer language in it and bike language. So we made our notes and sent it back, and I haven't seen any final review on it. So currently they aren't technically legal. It's not enforced. but I think it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming in most places, both at the local level and state and federal level, which is good. People, we don't need to go off on a tangent with e-bikes, but I think it means more users, and it's definitely a good functional activity, right?
Yeah, I don't care about more users. I need more volunteers.
We're gonna get to that. Let's go to. Is it the Tannehill Ironworks development? Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, Tannehill. That's a historical state park. It's not under the typical state park. It's under a historical commission. They're not funded under state parks. I don't think they're funded at all. So they survive off camping fees and gate fees. So they've had, the same 15-ish miles of trail since Pomp built the initial trails out there, back in the early 2000s. And it was kind of jam-packed in there. We got as much as we could out of it. It's a lot of machine-built stuff. I don't really remember who did it. It's well before my time. But there was 2 adjacent tracts of land of 500 acres apiece that got purchased by the Forever Wild Land Trust. And they're turned over for Tannehill to manage. And Tannehill's like, wow. So, we put together a plan. I spent months out there, mostly me and Roger, like falling down in the woods. You know what I mean? You flag trails. So I've fallen in stump holes and tripping and briars in your eyes. But me and Roger managed to flag about 15 miles of trail out there. We got Forever Wild's ecologists to go out there and get approval on it. And then we had to wait on the MOU to come through, which is kind of a slow and arduous process. But we got the green line, started digging. We wrote a grant for that one. Our proposal was we were going to build roughly 9 miles of trail ourselves, and then we needed funding to do some of the stuff that was more of a steep side slope. And we got the grant. We're blowing and going now. I've got 1 build crew on site and 2 more headed that way. Shaggy and Benny from Barry Smith are going to go out there and do a couple adaptive accessible gravity lines for us. There's some really good clay there and some really strange terrain that I'm pretty excited to see what they can do with. And Brian Furman's out there digging a beginner level adaptive trail off of kind of this giant fairground field they have. So we're going to have this, the beginner ultra wide, easy loop right there off the parking area. And it'll also serve to host, races for the high school mountain bike groups because, they like wide and limited liability. So it'll be good for that. And it's also going to be roughly a 3-mile loop. So that's going to start bringing in, the 5K trail runs and stuff. So just the amount of new visitors we'll get off that, I think is going to be incredible for the park. But we're going to end up with roughly 35 miles of trail there.
Yeah. And I think the most important part that I keyed in when I was looking up this one is the fact that it's slated to be the largest adaptive accessible mountain bike system in the Southeast.
Yeah, I don't really know of any big places. And I talked with Brian Peachy about it. And like the stuff he sent me, it looked like the biggest place that he was able to ride was Jared's Downhill Park. So I think we can meet that, unless somebody beats me to the punch. But everything we're adding, we're looking to make it adaptive. Or like everything within reason. There's one like ultra tech, like slow tech line we want to put in. And I don't know how to make that adaptive. I'm not smart enough. But the rest, like all the other stuff we're cutting with machines, and it's going to be adaptive accessible. And then we've got some machines of our own, and we're going to go in and touch up the existing stuff that was machine built. So I think, when it's all said and done, you'll have 25, 30 miles of mostly adaptive accessible trails there off a variety of rating systems. Like, I don't know if it's everywhere, but like the stuff that I've seen on the adaptive, it's like you need this much assistance to ride this trail, or you can ride this trail with no assistance, because like the turns when we put this stuff in years ago, they weren't set up, like those bikes didn't exist. So the turning radiuses are tighter, and if you get in there and you're stuck in the bike, you need somebody to help you move it around to make those turns. So like with what we're doing, we're starting with that in mind. So our tread width and our outslope, we're keeping close eyes on that. We're keeping close eyes on the turn radiuses. And then I want to rate it like regular mountain bike trails. I want full width rock gardens, full width drops, full width jumps. Make it fun for everybody, but it's doable for adaptive bikes as well.
Yeah, and it looks like you're working with the Adaptive Mountain Bike Project as one of the partners on that. And
yeah, Brian, I've consulted with him on the phone a few times. He hasn't been out here. I'm trying to get him out here. He was supposed to be coming through, I think, in October or November, and both of us just slammed with schedules, and we never got a chance to meet up and ride, but we're still working on it.
Well, and I looked that up, and I noticed that Philip Darden's part of that, like a co-founder of that. And, I've friends with Philip, and we've done a couple of podcast episodes on the side as well, but he never brought that up in conversation. And I think that deserves its own podcast in itself.
I talk to Philip 3 times a week, and this is the first I've heard of it.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Philip returned my call from yesterday while we're recording. He and I talk really frequently about a number of things. I'm actually it has nothing to do with this. I've called Philip like multiple times a week the entire time I've been on the board. But I'm the Alabama rep for SORBA now. So now I'm involved in all those phone calls, and I wouldn't say that's the reason I'm working and helping SORBA to raise money and do the things that SORBA needs to do, because I've always done that as well. Like as long as I've been involved, I've been trying to help. I think maybe there's something wrong with me. When people help me, I try to help them back. So I was calling, like, hey, I got an idea. It's either stupid or brilliant. That's the way most of my conversations start. And that's, the ones with, sometimes I call the county manager and say that, and other times it's Philip. Well,
and another part of this adaptive facility is the fact that you're also including refurbishing 3 bathhouses.
Yeah, I swung for the fences when I wrote that grant. I think it's safe to say it's not published anywhere, but I asked them for $700,000, and I wanted, a mini X and X amount of trails, and then the bathhouse facilities there weren't adaptive accessible, and they were in need of repair, and were getting quotes on it. So, like, well, I'm putting it in the grant too. So, I just started getting quotes and blueprints and tacking them together. So, yeah, I took a swing for the fences, and, I did what I needed to. I had some meetings with some people, and we talked about it. Told them what I had in mind, because I'm not a grant writer. And I was worried, that, what I've put in the presentation and what I put in this giant questionnaire form, does that properly convey the vision that we have for this project? So, I was told, you're not going to get $700,000. You probably do $250,000. You can get your trails built. That'd probably be about it. Then the grant came through. Can we curse on here?
Yeah, you can curse on it. Yeah, I don't edit that out.
Yeah, the grant. I got the grant email. I was riding one day. I managed to get off work early, and I was at the park, and I got a bunch of emails and phone calls when I was on the bike. Got off, and I was scrolling through my phone. Here's a DocuSign from Inovate Alabama. And I'm like, well, shoot, what's running through my head? If I click this button on my phone and I can't fill it out on my phone, can I reopen it? I got to know. So I clicked the button, and I just started scrolling until I see numbers, and it was like $697,000, and I about shit my pants. I couldn't focus the rest of the day. I just sent the contract to the treasurer because, it just completely blew my mind. But it's great. That whole program is, it's called Inovate Alabama, and I think it is pretty innovative. It's set up like that scene in Letterkenny where they're trying to invest their money and they have everybody from the town coming by with ideas. That's what it is. They have the grants and they run them a couple times a year. And if you're a nonprofit or a municipality and you've got this idea that, you can't fund, and you you send it to them. And if you convey it the right way and they understand your picture and they think it's going to benefit the state and the community, they're going to help you realize it. I mean, it's been a game changer for, even if it was just this Oak Mountain project, this one's incredible on its own. But the Tannehill project too, we had a plan and we had our vision, and we had really just heard about the adaptive stuff a couple years back at the SORBA conference. Like I never knew it existed, and they started talking about it, and I was just completely ignorant. I'm like, well, it's dirt sidewalks. But then I see the guys riding it, and I'm like, holy shit, they're they want to hit jumps. They're us. Like they're just us on different bikes. Some of them want to do distance and endurance and cross country and like backcountry and all day adventures, and some of them want to jump off rocks and try to get broke. And once we kind of realized that, we started looking at ways to try to incorporate it in Oak Mountain. I mean, we're doing the same thing everyone else was, like I've got a trail over here and a trail over there. And I think with a little touch up, they could both work. And like, how do you link it together? And, I couldn't figure out a way to make it work without putting it on a fire road. Before I'm going to get in the truck and go somewhere, you have to have a certain amount of distance of trails for me to do a road trip. And I'm like, if I can't get somebody a 20-mile ride, is it worth them getting in the truck? So like, I was looking at it, I can do it at Oak Mountain, but you're going to have so much fire road, and nobody likes riding fire road. It's a necessary evil somewhere, but like nobody goes to Pisgah and go, man, this is incredible. I climbed a fire road for 8 miles, and then I had to ride down this crappy single track. You can't get excited about riding fire road. So, when this opportunity came at Tannehill with this 1,000 acres, and like you can do whatever you want, we just kind of started drawing lines, and we've got a pretty good plan so far. The property's gorgeous. It's old growth forest. There's a lot of ridge lines. It goes back to the convergence of these a river and a creek. That's a really beautiful area too. So there's 2 lakes back there. I was in there. I get up stupid early. I'd say it's a sleep problem, but it just seems like it's my life now. But I wake up really, really early, and I drive out to Tannehill way before workday is supposed to start, and I drive down the little access road and get back there to the lakes. And I was kind of standing by the lake, and I hear a noise, and what is that? And I start watching, and there's a river otter out there playing around. I've never seen one in the wild. And then there was a beaver out there too. Like, it's such a beautiful property. I think it's going to be just huge for that part of town and for the adaptive community. I don't really know of a lot of adaptive riders around here now, but they're like mountain bikers where I grew up. There's no mountain bike trails. Well, why do you have an adaptive bike? But we have the Lakeshore Foundation here, and you should do some research into them. They're this incredible organization. They assist people that have had spinal injuries or for some reason aren't capable of recreating the way they want to without assistance. So they have like a Paralympic rugby team, basketball team, bike racing, and like they host it all there, and they have training facilities and gyms and pools and rock climbing walls and like adaptive bikes you can go in and check out. They got like dorm housing on site, medical on site. I'd never been in there until like a few months ago, and I went in to talk with them about something. It's like an incredible facility. So like between having that here and, our organization, like why shouldn't we be the biggest adaptive trail center in the Southeast?
Well, to put this into perspective, what is how far is this from, say, the core of Birmingham?
It's maybe 15 minutes. I live down south of Birmingham near Oak Mountain, and it's 30 minutes for me. From Hoover, downtown Birmingham, you're probably 15 minutes. From Bessemer, maybe 10. Birmingham has a huge metro area. Nobody lives downtown. It's just kind of sprawled out. So, everybody on the west side of town this is going to be, their closest access to outdoor recreation. And but like with the lakes and the river and everything else that goes along out there. They have all their historical stuff. That was I think a Confederate ironworks plant or something out there. So they still have a lot of really old cabins, and they do like metal working demos, and they have all the things that they have on the historical side, but then they also have 2,500 acres of forest land out there where you can go and hike and bike and fish and ride a horse or whatever you want to do.
That sounds incredible, especially to be so close to a metro area.
Yeah, I mean, we've got that one and Oak Mountain are the big ones around here. There's some smaller city parks that have, greenways or a few mountain bike trails here or there. But Oak Mountain and Tannehill are kind of the largest state park type properties where you can just, get out in the woods and get lost for a day.
Earlier, you brought up the IMBA Ride Center, and that is something that comes up intermittently, both in my professional career, but also through the podcast. And some people, I'm going to say of a younger generation, don't know what the IMBA Ride Center is. Others that are maybe more in the generation of Gen X or boomers or even older millennials know exactly what the Ride Center is. So what's your take on the Ride Center and how it provides value to your region?
It's kind of a tourism spotlight. I was kind of on the fence on the value of it. And then like as you go through the application or like the self-scoring process, I'm assuming you've gone through this document, it's kind of a huge pain. But I mean, what it does is evaluate not your trails, but your community for mountain biking. Do you have local breweries? Because all mountain bikers are alcoholics. Like, is there a bike shop nearby? Is there an airport? How's the infrastructure? Like, it's rating you for your value for people to travel there for a week or a weekend. So, I mean, I see that it has value. Oak Mountain was rated as an epic ride center for a long time, and then they changed the way they did the ratings, and then they moved it to like the Hall of Fame Ride Center or something like that. I mean, so we've been recognized for what we have for a long time. We're just, taking the steps to meet the needs to go to the next level with it. And even just in evaluating your trails is pretty useful. Because like I said, I'd sat around for years and I'm like, well, I love going down Thunder and I love going down Quarry, and Lightning and Tails are a blast. But like you sit down, you go through this sheet and like you evaluate everything within 30 miles and you're like, man, we got 100 miles of trail and, 5 miles of them are black and, 1 mile is directional. So, I mean, it helps you highlight what you're missing to put the whole picture together.
That's a huge part of it. And I think that's the part that some people misunderstand. And you'd also talked about how many miles of trail do you need to get into a truck and go somewhere. And it was funny. I was just having a similar conversation this morning with a coworker. It's like, you could have a place that has, say, 20 or 30 miles of trail, but they could be junk miles of trail. Whereas you could have a place that has, 10 to 15 miles of trail, and every mile is a high quality mile.
Yeah. I mean, I have, my buddy's the head mechanic at the bike shop, and he's got this stupid Volkswagen Bug, and he let his brother-in-law like put a lift kit on it and all this stuff. And he's like, I swear to God, this is real loud. And he's like, hey man, I need to go get my Bug from my brother-in-law's house. Can we tow it back behind your truck? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm like, let's go ride at this spot. And it's called Big Creek. It's outside of Atlanta. And there's just a handful of miles of trail, and it's on a city park. But they've got like 3 or 4 downhill runs. And, he was talking to some of his dealers and his reps, and they're like, man, no, you got to go to this other place. It's where all the miles are. Like, you can go here and you can ride all day. It's like, don't go there. It's just a little tiny park. And he and I went there and we had a blast for the afternoon. Like, we climbed that hill just over and over and over again. We climbed it till we got tired, and they were just like doing the top half of it repeats. So, I mean, the quality matters and quantity matters. I mean, it just depends on what you set out to do. like, I think people are going to travel from all over. Like Walden's Ridge doesn't have that many miles of trail, but I mean, you've heard of that place. I assume you're not local.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a game changer. Like it brings a different group to town. So I mean, we get a lot of people frustrated. Like anytime I take on building something, it's just like, well, why are you doing that instead of this? And I'm doing something. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So I mean, like we're just trying to create diverse trails for diverse users because I like to go and play on the rocks. I mean, right now I spend all my time on my XC bike. I ride it. I almost never pull my Bronson off the wall. I ride my Blur constantly. But if I'm getting in the truck and going somewhere, Blur's going on the wall and I'm taking the Bronson. Like I'm going to the desert. I'll see y'all in a week.
Yeah, I got the same exact mentality. I ride my Trek Top Fuel locally all the time, but if I'm traveling, I'm taking the Slash.
Yeah, I mean, those little XC trail bikes are getting really capable, and I can do some pretty stupid stuff on the little bike. But the tire choice makes a ton of difference to me. But like, if I'm going to Pisgah or if I'm going to Moab or Sedona or any of the number of places that I like to go, like it's staying here and I'm taking the big bike. I'm going for tech. I mean, that's why I travel. I like one to be so far in the middle of nowhere that I feel like I'm just gone. And I want to ride big rocks and steep chutes. And like, I want to see beautiful terrain and like backwoods forest and be alone, at least within the group of people that I take with me.
Yeah, I think that's why we all get into this. Let's get into mileage. And what I mean by that is you got an event coming up this fall called the OCAS 100. That's on October 18th of 2025. It's the NUE Series Championships.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that's a weird story because I'd heard about it like for years. And like, I think the last year they raced that was right after I started riding. But it started as a birthday ride. Michael Ballier and some other local nuts, like back in the late 90s, were like, I want to see what it's like to do 100 miles at Oak Mountain. And, all they had was the 17-mile loops. They're just like lapping all day. And it's just like a group of buddies out there, like challenging themselves. Like, we're going to be in the woods together all day, just me and my friends. This is awesome. And while I can't get down with 100 miles, I see the draw to it. Like, because, when you travel, you pack up your buddies and you just, you go to Pisgah and you get a cabin and like you get up and, slow morning, grab some coffee, grab some breakfast, a few hours on the trail and then grab lunch and then drink beer around a fire until you pass out or go to bed. So, I mean, it's just, it's about the friend side of it. So, I mean, that's the way this event started, was just like a birthday ride. Let's go see if we can do 100 miles. And then, we started getting more and more trails at Oak Mountain. And I always just assumed, by the time I started riding, it just seemed like they picked the hardest possible course that they could pick. But, after talking with these guys and interviewing them, to kind of get informed about, the history of the event, they were just trying to use every single trail that they could use. So it was like 25 miles and you had to do like one section of pavement, like 2 descents on one end of the park. And then, they made it a race for a while. And I think it was too hard and it was just advertised locally and nobody raced it. So it just kind of went away. And then like a year or two ago, I was sitting around and thinking, I had been to some endurance races and I like the crowd. I like the vibe. It's just, a different group of people and they bring like a different attitude and perspective to the sport. It's, it's more supportive. It's more friendship. It's less alpha. So, on a board call with the guys, I'm like, hey, I want to try to bring back this race. We're already snowed under with a fence and covered up, but everybody's like, oh yeah, let's do it. So, we put it on the schedule, got the timing guy, got a new route, put it out, and, we brought it back this year. And I went out there and raced it just to see if I could. It was, 2 pretty tough laps. It was a hot day. The descent's pretty technical. But, when we started bringing it back, we started talking to NUE because Jason Chandler is our timing guy, our promoter guy, and he's already got events with him. So we're just going to team up with him. We're going to do the NUE thing. And they're like, yeah, let's make it the series championship. I'm like, great. So, I had to come up with a new lap because they don't like laps. And, I was doing 4 25-mile laps. So I had to figure out a way to do a 50-mile lap, which is essentially, carrying on the history of this event. It's just like, how do you ride every single trail in the park? So, it's going to go use most of the existing trail system that we've had inside Oak Mountain proper. But then there's also 2,000 acres of forever wild land on the east end of the park where they're building trails. And that's where those gravity lines are. So it's going to also go up on that property and then loop back into Oak Mountain. And I think the first lap's 49-ish miles with about 4,700 feet of climbing. It's going to be a real test. There's almost no fire road. There's just like a couple miles of gravel, a couple miles of fire road, and a whole lot of historical bump, hand cut, volunteer trails from, years ago. So it's really going to be, I think, the people I've talked to said it's going to be one of the more challenging single day events around.
Yeah, that sounds perfect for an NUE event.
Yeah. When I plan the course, nobody wins.
It sounds like the southern version of what we have up here, which is the Margie Gessick, which is a 112-mile NUE event, and it's difficult.
That's, one of our past presidents, I started reaching out to him a while back, and he lives up there somewhere, and he does the Margie. And he said it's comparable. He came down this year, and he did the course, and he said it about broke him. And, I told him, I'm like, it's going to be harder next year, and told him what I had planned. He's like, yeah, it's going to be comparable to that, which I don't know anything about that. I've just heard it called, it's on the NUE series, and it seems like it's one of those, you got to try it once things.
Oh, yeah. And if you're really dumb, you go back. I've like me.
See, the bad thing was, I put together this course in my head, and I'm like, man, this is going to be terrible. And then I thought of a way. I'm like, I can make this worse. But I want people to come back. I could make them climb the technical descent, which is doable, but it's tough sledding.
That's exactly the crap they do at the Margie Gessick. And the thing with that race is that it's a point to point race. And so you start if you're doing the 50 or the 100, you start in Marquette and you end in Ishpeming, which is higher than Marquette elevation wise. And so it is, when they say it's all uphill, it is all uphill. Obviously you have to go down, but it's one of those events that you don't want to go down anymore, because that means you have to go up something else.
Jeez. Yeah. I've had those days on ridges and Pisgah. I'm like, when does it start going downhill? Yeah, this one is still going to be 2 laps for the 100. We're trying to, I hired Jason because he knows how to put on races. I'm become pretty educated on races, especially the financing of racing. By the way, there's no money in racing, so don't start a racing company. But, Will was the race director when I got on the board, and now he's the VP. That guy is I'd say he's a hot man, but he's not like a typical hot man. He's not jumping around and screaming. He should have been a party planner, because he just creates a vibe. He just brings an atmosphere and conjures it. And as soon as I got on the board, I started working with him, and how do we make our summer race bump and grind? You've probably heard of that one. It's been around 30 plus years now. That's how we've been funding the organization for so long. But how do we make this, the next level? How do we have vendors here? How do we turn it into a festival atmosphere? What do we do to make it fun? So, we've studied on that. We've had some trial and error, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. So we take what we learned there, which is throw a big ass party with a race next to it. And that's what we're going to do for Oak House. There's going to be, good food. live band, bunch of people hanging out, just good all day in the woods with your friends atmosphere that, carries on the history of this event.
Why don't you talk about the bump and grind quick, since you just brought it up? And it looks like you've actually got 4 events. All of them appear to be longer than your average event.
Yeah, I mean, bump and grind has been a big deal for a long time. At one point, it was on like the national XC circuit. I've got pictures of Tinker Juarez racing it, back in the late 90s, and Jeremiah Bishop and all those guys. They came through town when it was part of that, the national XC circuit. Then they kind of changed the format to like a small lap format. And I guess, the people who were in charge at the time weren't willing to make the change, or the course option wasn't available. So, we stuck with the 20 to 25 mile loop and just, continued doing big loop XC races. And, now we've been doing it 30 plus years. I mean, it's such a historical thing for us. I had, the first year's president, they came to me and they're like, we want to change this and this and this. And, it's so much easier to make something worse than it is to make it better. And like the event had been around so long that, I felt a lot of pressure to not be the guy that messed it up. But I mean, I did some thinking on it, and I'm like, okay, guys, do it. So when we started making some changes, and the event's gotten, continually better over the last few years. And we typically have about 500 registrations across the 2 days, probably 400 plus individual racers coming from 10 to 12 states around the Southeast. So it's a huge juniors presence. And we're one of the few big races around that, the juniors can come to and get USAC points. So I've made some changes this year in the structuring to try to help them like maximize the amount of USAC points you can get. And, this is the part of racing I'm pretty ignorant to. But like, it's based off of like who's in your category and how many people in your category in the start group. So we made some changes this year to just launch giant start groups for, the Cat 1 under 18 guys that are chasing points to get to nationals. We're doing what we can to maximize their opportunities to be able to compete at the nationals events, because your start order when you get there is based off of your point standing. And if you start dead last in a group that big, you're probably going to finish dead last too. So, I mean, we're doing what we can to help there. But yeah, I mean, it's been, a staple in the Southeast for years. I can't go anywhere without seeing somebody that's been to a bump and grind at some point. And I'm just trying not to mess it up.
Well, it looks like it also has enduro and short track.
Yeah, that was an addition that Will and I came up with early on. We did our first enduro a couple years back. We've had some growing pains with that. Some of the timing guys overpromised and underdelivered and kind of left us with egg on our face. Typically or historically, as long as I remember, we didn't have an enduro. We had 2 timed downhill segments on Saturday. And those were always a big hit. But, when enduro started getting popular, we wanted to, showcase what we could put together for that. So we did it. And like I said, I mean, the first year was kind of a disaster. Last year, Chainbuster had I can't remember one of those wristband timing systems, and it executed flawlessly. Like, we didn't have any missed time. Everything was dead on, no arguments. So that was a good investment there. So we've got the enduro Saturday morning and the short track Saturday afternoon. And that short track, we kind of brought that back because it used to be part of our Omnium series, our Omnium point scoring system. That was a lot more fun than I thought it was. Now, I wasn't doing it. I was like stressed to the gills and in the middle of working a 60-hour weekend for free. But like watching the racers do it was pretty entertaining because it's all right around the South Trailhead. And we set up, a fast but fun and challenging course, weaving in around the different parking areas in the woods adjacent to them. And there's a giant hill out there that we built a 30-inch drop on the side of the hill on the A-line. But that's been, a pretty popular race and one that's really fun to watch. And it's a high energy atmosphere around it. And then Sunday, of course, is the XC event. It's always been 20 to 25 miles for Cat 1 and 2, and then Cat 3 is like a 9 or 10 mile course. So we try to have something for everybody. There's a kids race. I think we could do that Saturday morning this year. So, it's a big one. Bring the family. Alabama's wonderful in June. It's not hotter than the devil's toenails.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I was there in late May of last year, and it was actually, I think it was about the same temperature there as it is where I live in Wisconsin. And so it was mid 70s, I want to say.
It's really a low roll of the dice in June. Like we've had years where like it's soupy and, 95 degrees and like it's just miserable all weekend. And we've had some of them where the high is like 80 and it's just incredible. It's a roll of the dice. I normally just bank on it being miserable.
Well, and going back to the Elcast being in mid-October, that'll probably be perfect.
Yeah, October in Alabama is the time to come. I wish October was all year. It's a bit before the leaves change. There's still some pretty warm days here or there. Typically doesn't rain a lot, but it's, the humidity's down. It's typically in the 70s and low 80s. So, that's prime riding weather in Alabama is October.
Well, one of the reasons this podcast was created was really to highlight what it takes to run a trail org and what goes into it, and to provide some insight to other people who are listening to this podcast. And obviously running a trail org has, its challenges, and it has a lot of volunteers. What are some of the challenges you've came into, and maybe some advice you'd have for other trail orgs when it comes to managing volunteers, and just leading the organization itself?
Our board, like everybody on our board has like a superpower that makes them good at what they do. Like Will, like he's artistic, organized, party planner guy. George is probably the smartest person I know. At least he's smart in a way that I'm not, and it interests me. Anne's organized, and she brings a lot of energy to the ladies group stuff, brings us all that perspective. Scott's probably, the most generous person that I know. Like, you'll never ask for help from Scott and not get it. Butch is like incredibly friendly, great for, maintaining membership. For like all the guys, they bring something to the board that I don't have. And like, their support is what pulls it all together. So like help is what you need, and don't ask for help vaguely. Tell people what you need. So don't say I need help. Say I need help with this on this day, this time, for this long. And you might actually get help. But surround yourself with passionate people who share your vision and complement your weaknesses. That's it. I get a lot of credit for what happens here, but like I'm surrounded by superheroes. Oh, I forgot Freddie. Freddie's the small business guy, and he's running our races now. Jacob was race director before. He was a lawyer. He had, different perspectives and was great for wording things in a way that weren't actionable because I tend to be too blunt. But, Freddie owns a couple of local restaurants. He has this, innovative small business mindset that I don't have either. So like I said, surround yourself with passionate people and share your vision. And if people see that you're working as hard as you can and you're doing all you can do, people will help. It's like I'm not ultra capable or ultra skilled at anything. I'll outwork you. I'll work you to death. Because I try. That's my superpower. I try hard. And by trying hard for long enough, I've managed to trick people into helping me.
Well, before we wrap this up, I shouldn't say always, but I almost always ask all the guests what their opinion of, and this is a personal opinion thing, so you don't have to be politically correct about any of this, but what is your personal opinion of what makes a great community for mountain biking?
It's different, and I've thought about this a lot. I've got some buddies down south that got some private land in Mobile, and when I go to their events, it seems like a really tight community. And like, how do I do that? And why don't I have that? We've got 500 members and there's a couple of dozen of them. And, I spent probably too much time thinking about it, but like, you have to go back to like the oldest structure there is, and it's church. So like, I'm at mega church level here, and you're not going to get all these people to meld together into like one giant tight group of 500 people. But, you have your rock jumping guys, and you have your flow trail guys, and you have your XC guys. And, they all kind of meld together and they form, these little small groups that kind of look cliquey from the outside and may or may not be. But, that's the trick is, when you're viewing your community from 10,000 feet, you can't expect to have like an ultra tight group of 500 people and call it a community. But like the sub communities within it can be really strong, and tying those together with a common interest, and also planning your events and your trail design to meet the needs of all these different groups who ride for different reasons. They have different motivations, like just to be outside or to be with their family or to get away or for exercise or just for fun. And then you got, the rocks and the jumps and the endurance guys. Like, build something for everybody and plan events for everybody to facilitate all this. And you'll have a robust community, whether or not like you feel engaged in each mini group or not. There'll be a lot of small communities that'll develop around it.
Nice. It's a very different outlook from what most people say. And that's why I appreciate people answering this question from a personal perspective, because I want to hear everybody's different outlook on this. And I think other people should hear everybody's different outlook as well, because it's like having a bunch of different communities, right?
Yeah, I think too much. Like I said, I looked at, the rebellion guys, and I'm like, why are they so tight and it's so fun to hang out with them? And I'm like, well, they're all guys that push up the hill and ride down it. And at the end of the day, like, they get 5 miles and then they drink beer and grill hot dogs, and that's what they want to do. And like that's kind of, they've grown together. And I don't really fit in a box in any of these groups, but we have a really tight community built around our trail volunteers. And I've kind of thought about that too, because, everybody I know that rides, I've met through one of the volunteer work days. And, I always kind of felt like there was a click there. And I'm sure it looks like that from the outside, but we all met each other in this group. And, we've been out there digging together. And then after we dig together, we'll have a burger and drink a beer together. And then after that, we might ride, or we might just sit there and drink beer all day. But, we've kind of grown together in a real tight friend group. And when someone comes to one of the work days and they kind of catch the vibe, they're like, I want to stay. So it's tough to bring people into the group, but it's not tough to keep them in the group.
That's a great way to end this one, Chase.
If I was making all that shit up, I hope it went all right.
Well, I guess the only people that will know that is you, or the only person that'll know that is you, and maybe if Marcus agrees that it's all made up or not.
And Marcus, he doesn't know much.
Yeah. Well, again, I appreciate all the time you've shared with this, the perspective you've brought in with your trail organization, the things that you guys have going on with Inovate Alabama, the adaptive riding, expansion of Oak Mountain with the gravity stuff, and just what people can do for mountain biking around Birmingham, Alabama, because it's a large community. I mean, it's a large metro area.
Yeah, I mean, there's more opportunities out there, and as we mechanize more and figure out how to, be more efficient with our volunteer time and labor, I think we're probably going to look to adopt some other trail systems.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're going to spin me off on another tangent and never be able to get off the phone with me if we keep going. I can talk about mountain biking all day.
We'll have to save that for just the mountain bike only podcast, not the bump podcast, right?
Yeah, well, give me a call if you want me back. Like I said, I can go on and on. We've always got something going on. Like we stay too busy, and we're all spread thin. But we have a common vision, and so far nobody's tried to kill me. So I haven't crossed the line yet, but I'm sure I'll have something completely different on the drawing board next time you call.
Well, maybe we'll be able to cross paths here, and I believe it's May. There's a good chance I'm going to be in Pisgah, or at least that's the goal.
Are you going to the SORBA thing?
I have it on my calendar. I got to make sure I can fit it between work travel, because that would be fun travel.
Yeah. I mean, that's a sales trip for you. That's easy. I just solved your problem. Bring the big bike. Because, I have some duties as the state rep, but there's going to be at least one day that I'm finding Black Mountain.
Oh, the big bike will be there, because you can't, I mean, at least for me personally, like if I'm going that far from Wisconsin, I'm going to figure out a way to get a day at Ride Rock Creek as well. Yeah,
I haven't tried that one yet. I always play the hits. I got introduced to Pisgah by my friend Chuck, and he showed me the gnarliest stuff out there, and when I go back, I always go. You always play the hits because they're hits. Yeah, I don't venture out and try a lot of new stuff because I don't want to miss out on doing one of my old favorites again.
Isn't it interesting how we get in those habits? Because it's the same thing for me when I go places that I'm familiar with. Like I end up riding the same stuff, even though I know I should be like figuring out what the new hits are.
Yeah, I've done the same trip to Moab, Grand Junction, and Fruita 3 times with 3 different groups of guys. So yeah, it's strange. And if I go back to Sedona, I'll probably ride all the same thing because I always find somebody to show me around that knows what they're doing, and then I just go back and keep hitting the same stuff again and again. Well, luckily you can't miss out there.
No, you can't. I was actually just in Sedona in January, so that was a personal trip.
Good for you. I got to go to Phoenix for my birthday 2 years ago, but that's the last time I got to go to the desert. Have you gone to Halls out there?
I haven't, but I've heard a lot of good things about it, and I've had one of the builders on the show that's built at Halls.
Yeah, don't watch those videos from Sunset Ridge and go, nah, that's not a double, because it's a double.
Yeah, so you've enjoyed Haas?
Yeah, I mean that was my favorite thing out there. I've gone to the National a couple of times, and like the last time I went, it was so crowded, and the rental bike for some reason had like the slowest hub on the planet, and riding like tech climbs with a slow hub was just awful. But our time at Halls, we really enjoyed. We put together kind of a big loop, just blind off Trail Forks. And I knew we wanted to hit Sunset Ridge. And, we headed straight up there, like fresh out of the truck on a rental bike I've never ridden, dirt I'm not used to. And man, that'll scare the piss out of you. It's fun though. It's fun. I mean, I love Phoenix. It's a great, great place. I'm sure they've got other trails there. And it's a short drive to Sedona and Flagstaff and everywhere else.
Yeah, and Prescott, which is another place I need to get to. Yeah, I drug my fiance around the hogs up in Sedona, and I took her on Highline. And
you took her on Highline, and you're still married?
Well, we're engaged, and so actually we got engaged at the top of Highline. That was my plan. I'm like, if she can get up here, I guess we could probably call this one good.
Yeah. I went and my buddy Chris showed us around, and I'm like, hey man, exposure freaks me out, and takes me to something called Sketch, and then High on the Hog and Highline were like our days. So everything he took, like climbing Highline, I'm just like staring at my front tire the whole way up. But that's such an incredible place. Like the hogs were fun. Like, did you see that video of the guy trying to ride a unicycle on the white line?
I think I saw the thumbnail for it, but I didn't click on it.
Yeah, that unicycle just flipped down and it's like turn the sound on and you just hear this unicycle clattering down the mountain. That guy's lucky he wasn't with it. But yeah, that's a gorgeous place. The only thing is like the traffic sucks because it's, one way through town. It's essentially Gatlinburg in the desert.
Yeah, the first time I went to Sedona, like I knew about it for mountain biking, but I didn't know about it for everything else. And so the way that you just said Gatlinburg in the desert is exactly what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. There's, little turquoise shops. It's pretty tourist trappy, but there's so much good trail. Like you can't overlook it. There's everything for everybody. I took my wife out there for her first trip out west, and we didn't carry bikes. We just hiked around to everything, but it's still beautiful. But it rained like the whole time we were there. Like,
really?
Yeah, like it's the desert. I didn't carry a raincoat. There's sold out of ponchos and raincoats everywhere in Sedona. I found one in an outdoor store and got like the last raincoat in the whole town because everybody was there on vacation and nobody thought it rained.
Yeah, we had beautiful weather. It was a little chilly, but we had amazing blue skies the whole time we were there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. When we were out there for my 40th, my buddy and his wife broke loose and he took her to Sedona in the Grand Canyon and they got to do Sedona in the snow. And the Grand Canyon in the snow. The pictures were pretty incredible. Like it's gorgeous out there. The desert is where I like to be. That's where I plan most of my vacations. I typically do Pisgah every other year in the desert every other year because my wife won't let me do those big trips every single year. And like Pisgah's a consolation prize. I mean, still some of the best riding on the East Coast, but is compared to riding the whole enchilada is probably my favorite thing to do ever. I've done it 3 times now. And if I could be doing it today, I'd be doing it today.
I've not had that opportunity yet, so I still got to figure out. I got to get to Moab for the whole enchilada.
Yeah, go after July because Burro Pass is closed up until July for snow and animal migrations. So I've gone twice in June and you couldn't ride Burro Pass either time. And Burro Pass, like the whole enchilada is incredible because like as you're descending this 8,000 feet or whatever it is, like the terrain changes so much. You're in alpine forest and you're in scrub and you're in high desert. And like as you descend, like the plants get shorter and shorter and the animals get smaller. It's just so wild. And it'll be, 45 degrees at the top and 105 at the bottom. But that top part on Burro Pass is like an alpine Pisgah. Like it's steep and rocky and beautiful and like just creeks everywhere. Like it's such a fun trail. Like when we went, it was raining. Like it was sprinkling on us at the top and everything was slick as shit. So it was pretty sketchy, but it was an unforgettable part of the trip getting to do that the first time. But you have to climb like 1,000 feet over 2 miles, starting at 10,000 feet to get, through the pass. So, I mean, be in shape.
Yeah, breathing.
Or at least don't be the one in the worst shape in the group. Because then they're going to be standing at the top of that ridge making fun of you as you push your bike up the last portion.
It sounds like an incredible place to go. And I've been through Moab, but I haven't had the opportunity to ride there yet, and we're gonna make it happen. But for that, we're gonna come back to the southeast.
Yeah, I think we've got something to show you. So let me know when you can get down this way because we're just growing and growing and growing. There's about 100 miles of trail here. Shelby County's building about 10 miles of trail every year, buying new properties, building new trails, and then you got what we're doing on top of that. So, I think by the time we do our ride center evaluation, we'll have easily 100 miles of trail. I mean, we could, if we had more elevation, we'd have a shot at, a gold level ride center. We can't check all the boxes you need for like the minimum grade on some of the climb and descend trails to go from silver to gold. But I mean, we're going to be a hell of a silver.
I know they're redoing their evaluation, but Duluth, Minnesota, I want to say is currently gold.
Really?
There's elevation there, but not any more than what you just described. I don't think there's more than 600 feet in Duluth.
No, I'm going to turn them in then. Well, I mean, if you have
Duluth just has a lot of really good neighborhood connecting trail. Like they have a 100 miles of trail that connects the whole community from one in town.
Yeah. You know? So there's other ways around it. You got to check this box or that box. And we don't have a downhill service park here. And that's something that you can score significant points off of. But it's just not something that we've ever had here or been able to sustain here. We've got an e-bike park, but that doesn't check that box. So, we were looking at how do we qualify for these minimum grade climbs, and the math just didn't shake out.
Yeah, and see, Duluth has a gravity bike park at their ski hill that operates as a chairlift access bike park in the summer. Yeah,
that's big points as far as their riding center goes.
Well,
all right, man, I've drug you off on another tangent.
I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this, and we'll get this one recorded and out into the world to consume here very shortly.
All right, man. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for listening. If you like what you've heard, please take the time to share these shows with others. Sharing these shows will help create awareness of both the guests who have taken the time to be on the show and the podcast series itself. Also, if you're new to the Trail Effect Podcast, check out our ever-expanding library of episodes. If you listen to the Trail Effect Podcast on Apple or Spotify, please don't forget to leave a rating and review, as this is one of the best ways to show our support for the Trail Effect Podcast. Also, don't forget to check out Cooley Creative at www.dudejustsendit.com. For additional ways to help support the Trail Effect Podcast, check out the affiliate links tab at the Trail Effect website, where you'll find links to Kettle Mountain Apparel, Worldwide Cyclery, and Trail One components. By using the affiliate links found at www.traileffectpodcast.com, a small commission will come back to the podcast, which will help keep this thing going. This podcast has been edited and produced by Evolution Trail Services. Thank you again for listening.